guys, Stuart Tomlinson Warrior Collective. I hope you're well. We're back once again inside chat, and today's guest is a very unique individual who I first met down in London last year during actually the pandemic. It was actually in between part of the lockdowns, and that is Matt Jane, the modern Shaolin. Now, Matt's background is hugely different to most people's within the world of martial arts, and that's why I knew I had to have him here as a guest. So, Matt, thank you for sparing the time to join me.
Oh, thank you very much, my man. It's always a pleasure. I love the projects that you create, and it's another great opportunity to share with another martial artist some perspectives, and yeah, just bring the community together.
Like I said, it's really great to have you on. Now, most people listening or watching, their backgrounds, typically if they're in the UK, for example, they're going to be karate, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, Shaolin Kung Fu. That's it's pretty unique. How did you first come about finding Shaolin Kung Fu?
Well, like with a lot of children, especially boys, when I was younger, just being interested in martial arts, action movies, Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan, Jet Li, these type of people were my role models, and I was always looking for somewhere to train. And we're talking, 25 years ago, there was definitely no internet back then. So it was very, local, small little gyms. I did some Wing Chun, I did some Taekwondo, karate, some of the basics, some of the things that most children go through. And it wasn't until I was 11 years old when the Shaolin Wheel of Life, which is a 2-hour theatre show by the Shaolin monks, came to the UK, came to London. They toured obviously UK, and they were here in London performing at the Dominion Theatre. And it was the first time that, they had actually travelled outside of China to perform. And it was in all the newspapers, and my mom reads the Guardian newspaper. And I remember she was just reading the newspaper one weekend, and she's called me down and said, "Look, you've got to check this out." And I remember the picture actually. It was of a style of kung fu called Tong Zigong, which is young boy kung fu. The kid was kind of in a handstand with his legs curled over his head, obviously with a shaven head in his monk robes. And it just looked incredible. It looked incredible. And there was a small description that she read out to me explaining who the Shaolin are. And I didn't really have too much knowledge of them at the time. Um, I'd heard, obviously, Bruce Lee had touched on it a little bit in Enter the Dragon with the whole idea of the Shaolin Temple and the Buddhist monk at the beginning giving him some guidance, etc. So I had knowledge, and I'd read the Bruce Lee books, and his kind of involvement in learning the animal styles and things like that. I think there's a few interviews of Bruce Lee where he's doing the crane and the tiger. This really intrigued me. So reading about it, and it was real. It wasn't a movie or something like that. It was these real Shaolin monks. I just wanted to check them out. So fortunately, we got tickets. I think it was like several weeks after, it had been advertised or covered in the newspapers. And I remember lining up at the Dominion Theatre. If you've ever been to Tottenham Court Road in central London, great space, very crowded. And there was just this huge queue just going all the way around the side. Obviously, I remember it probably a little bit different to reality just because I was younger, but it was a huge queue. Finally got in, and our seats weren't the best of seats. We had the seats with the binoculars where you can grab the binoculars, which is kind of cool anyway, the little red binoculars. And we're watching the show, and the show obviously tells a story of the Shaolin monks. So it was very educational and informative. So it had the martial arts and the education for me behind Chinese culture and what Shaolin was. And from that moment, I was just hooked. I saw a guy do a finger handstand, people flying through the air. And obviously, it's not a movie where there's cuts and things like that. It's real-time action. And I was just blown away. And it gave me the dream. I was like, I need to go to Shaolin. The whole production was about the Shaolin Temple, and it had the abbot. And I was like, I need to go to the Shaolin Temple. And I held on to this dream for years to come. And like a lot of children, you have a dream. You want to be a football player. You want to be a singer or a policeman. And these dreams kind of fade out, and you go into something else. You turn into a teenager, and your focus kind of pans off a little bit. But for me, I held on to the dream. And when I was 16, I decided to leave school, and I flew out to China. It was year 11 to A levels, which back when I went to school, you was allowed a gap year. So I persuaded my parents to kind of send me out for a year of Shaolin training experience, and then I would come back to UK and then go right back into mainstream education. My mom, growing up, was a ballet dancer and had performed for the Royal. She grew up in the States and had ended up in the UK performing for the Royal Ballet School, and she she understood my connection with wanting to train and the physical kind of art. By this stage, she was now already deeply involved in the academic world. So a lot of people thought, no way is your mom going to let you kind of drop school to move to China. But she did. She gave me the opportunity to have a gap year, if you like. And I ended up flying out to China, ended up at the Shaolin Temple, Royal China. And obviously, this is back when there was no smartphones. So I had my little Lonely Planet book with me, learning little bits of Chinese phrases, trying to get past and whatnot. And that was basically the start of the story. And then before you know it, I was speaking Chinese, I was performing, I was training, you're training 8 to 10 hours a day. I was living at the Shaolin Temple. And I kind of realized that dream. There's been so many moments in my life where I feel like, geez, I've realized the dream. This is the day. But so I realized the dream just 3 months into the trip. And it was very affordable to live out there. The exchange rate was incredible at that time. And it was my choice just to remain there, really. Like, I decided that, I was near enough 18 and, this is my life. And I just didn't enjoy school. Anyone who's watching youngsters, school is great. School is, you have so many opportunities, and going to school in a country like the UK, man, you have so many resources. You can be whatever you want to be. And I was doing great at school. I wasn't a bad student. I was, an A or B student. It wasn't that I didn't like school or I felt school wasn't necessarily helping me. It just wasn't my passion, you know. And I think education is great. But if you have a dream, if you have a passion, you got to go after that dream, and you can't let anyone tell you can't do it. There's loads of people, my teachers, with friends, people thought it was crazy what I was about to do. Now, obviously, 15 years, 16 years later, having the temple, having had my own TV shows, been on, covers of magazines and news reports and things like that. Now, those same people kind of come back and are wowed by what I achieved and kind of look back and say, geez, I wish when I was your age, I followed through with my dream. A lot of people end up in kind of, again, not that there's any issue with it, but a lot of people, they lose their dream and they just end up in standard, laboring jobs. And, you speak, and I'm sure you come across a lot of these guys as well, in particular men. You have these kind of slightly overweight men who come to train, and you think they're just, an average Joe, and they'll tell you stories of when they were younger and that they were super passionate about training, and they just kind of let it slip. They just let that dream slip. And it doesn't take more than a day to drop the penny, and then it's over. You've got to stay consistent, you've got to be patient, and you've got to give it time. So anyone out there listening, school is great, but if you have a dream and you're passionate about that dream, go and make it happen. And don't let anyone tell you can't do it, and definitely don't give up. It takes time. It definitely takes time, and you've got to be willing to put the effort in, and you've got to be willing, like we were just speaking about COVID, you've got to be willing to look at the negatives from a positive perspective and channel whatever negativity or aggression you may have into your dream and passion. It's life is about you after all. It's not about anyone else. Bruce Lee said it as well. What did he say? I'm not in this world to live up to your expectations, and you're not in this world to live up to mine. So don't watch anyone who's trying to tell you you can't do it. They're just allowed to have their opinion. That's fine. But if you know what you're doing and you have a goal, go get it. So yeah, that was the start of my dream. Seeing the wheel of life and flying out to China.
It's crazy when you say it like that. At the age that you were, especially back then, like you said, pre-internet, to just go on your own to China, that was a brave and a big thing. If we go back to that point, then, what happened when you got? Did you have it organized before you went?
Oh,
What
geez.
happened once you got off the plane? Obviously, because you'd not really been involved in this culture being in the UK, and then all of a sudden you're
Yeah.
completely immersed in it as a
Yeah.
as a young lad from the UK. What was that like at that point?
Well, it was like, I mean, everyone's life is unique. Everyone's life is unique. and I think everyone has a story to tell, which is great. And I, obviously, being me, I know my story, and I think my story is great. And I've told some of my story, and many people have heard bits of my story, but I've never really had an opportunity. Many people say I should write a book, and I just haven't had the time. But if we just take it right back to just before I went to China, it was one heck of a story. And believe me now, this is not made up. And you can ask me the same question. You know, you see me talk about the same question years ago, and in years to come, it'll be the same answer or the same explanation. I had started to train Shaolin martial arts in a Kung Fu school in Walthamstow. Um, and it was okay. And it was with a Chinese master. Again, there's a lot of controversy about martial arts, and he's like, I get, you're not Chinese, why are you running a school and all of this business. And I suppose as a kid I had a similar perspective. My master, my teacher at the time was Chinese, which meant he was better. It was authentic to some extent. I was training with this guy who was apparently a Shaolin monk from the Shaolin temple, spoke very little English. And I had this goal to go to China, so obviously who to turn to? He's the man, because he's from the Shaolin temple, but he spoke very little English. So we started to put things in place, did some research, and his involvement, his participation and help was to get, because I was underage, I wasn't 18, I was a minor, so I couldn't just travel abroad as a tourist, on your own. It just doesn't work like that. So I needed to have a letter from the temple inviting me, or just saying that I'm allowed to come. And we did our research, we did our bits. I had to get certain jabs, and appointments were made at the doctors, the flights were purchased, all of this business. And this letter, which I needed to get for my visa, it was always the same conversation. At the time, this guy I called Shifu, which means master in Chinese, and I would call him and say, "Hello, Shifu." I'd speak in broken English. I need the letter, letter for China, this one. And his answer it was always the same. It was like, "Yeah, you soon. Yeah, you come after, yeah, soon." And it's like, okay, when, like when, trying to get these answers. And I don't really know what happened, and I don't know the entire situation behind everything on his side, but he couldn't get the letter. He just couldn't get the letter. And it was like a week or less before the flights, so my mom started to speak about canceling the flights, and re-looking at things. And she's a very positive person, so look, we'll cancel the flights and we'll look into it and we'll make it work, but maybe just not at this moment in time. And that was devastating. I remember that period of time. It was a very unhappy kind of few nights, and I didn't really know what to do. There was no real alternative. I had a number for where I was going in China, a telephone number, and I decided to try one last thing. And this is a real story, but it seems like it's out of a movie. I said to my mom, "Look, I'm gonna go to the Chinese takeout," which was literally maybe a mile or two just from my house. I pedaled to the Chinese Chinese restaurant, which is still there in this local area, because I've moved around, but I'm back in an area very local to where I grew up, where I lived. I cycled to this restaurant, and they had the letterbox. It was closed, obviously. It's a takeout restaurant, and it's before kind of one. Sorry, messages are coming through. It's before kind of 1 p.m. or whatnot. They're closed. They're not open. So I start shouting through the letterbox, and it's near the floor. So I'm kind of on my knees with my little phrase book, my Lonely Planet phrase book, and I'm just screaming through the box, "Ni hao, ni hao," hoping that there's going to be someone come down. Eventually, this guy comes down, and he's obviously asleep. They work late, obviously doing their shift. He's kind of sleeping. He's like, again, broken English, "What do you want?" And he lets me in, and I explain to him as best as I can who I am. I'm like, I want to go to China, China, and explaining Kung Fu and all these businesses. It's pretty funny. And I was like, "I need a letter. Can you help me phone this number and ask for a letter?" And they need to fax it. There was emails, but it wasn't very popular at that time. So I needed a letter faxed, and who has a fax machine at home anyway? So my stepdad, who worked in the local college, they had a fax machine, and he was friends with the receptionist. He got the fax number, and that was the number we gave. China is 8 hours in front, or yeah, 8 hours in front. So he said later. I phoned them later. I was like, okay, later. So they open. I think they open later, like maybe 5 p.m. or something like that. So I start calling, and they're taking orders. Hello. I'm like, oh, I came in early, and they're like, please don't phone. We're taking orders. I was like, geez. So my mom was like, look, just wait, just wait. It gets later, 10, 11, 12. No answer from the guy. I'm thinking, geez, what's going to happen? Has he spoken to them? We can't do anything. It's midnight now. There's nothing we can do. The next morning, 7 a.m., I woke up, and with my stepdad, we went across to the college. He knows the security. No one was there yet. The security man was there. He opened up the reception, and behold, right there, 6 letters, 3 in English and 3 in Chinese. We got unbelievable, my name, my date of birth, all of that stuff on the letter. Boom, we grabbed the letters. We went straight to the Chinese embassy, which is where you got your visas back then. And we applied for same-day service, which it all just went through smoothly. Got my visa, and literally the next couple of days after that, that was it. I flew out to China, landed in Shanghai. It's like a 10-hour drive down to Henan province, which is where the Shaolin Temple is, which was in a little kind of, they call them mianbao cars. They look like loaves of bread. They're the little kind of little vans that you still see in the UK sometimes. They're these little vans, and we're going on these broken roads and bumping, and I'm in the back, and finally we arrive at the Shaolin Temple, and it was just, again, a moment in my life where it was like, geez, this is my dream come true. I'm seeing for the first place the temple right there in front of me. I've heard about it, I've read about it, I've seen photos, and this is it, this is it. So yeah, that's the story to how I actually managed to get out there. So even the story to do with me getting out there is quite unique. And again, I would tell people that, don't let any hardships stop you, because you're gonna have loads of people say you can't do it. And in fact, there's gonna be loads of obstacles that are probably gonna appear to be these huge walls, but there's always a way around, or above or below, and you just got to be willing to dig deep enough to find the solution. What do they say? Every problem has a solution, and every solution has a problem. Is perspective. So yeah, that's how I got out there. That is how I got out there.
So, as this young boy from the UK, and I'm guessing like when you were training in the UK, it wasn't as immersive as it was ever going to be when you went to the temple. What was your daily routine like when you got there? What was the training like? What was the whole culture shock like in terms of being at the temple? Because obviously it's not just physical training, is it? It's a complete lifestyle. It's
Yeah.
it's so many things. So how was that? What was expected of you on a daily basis when you got there then?
Cool. So, I mean, I was 16. I grew up in Camden. I went to school in Camden, and I carried, as most youngsters still do, this very kind of egotistical, I'm very cool, and, I'm hard, and life is tough, and, this type of attitude. I got out to China, and now we're training 8 to 10 hours a day. In the Kung Fu school I was at, obviously in Walthamstow, being the student who's going to go to China, I was obviously one of the best students in the club. So I also went to China with this kind of ego that, I'm already pretty good. I can do a few kicks and whatnot. I just learned to flip, and I was like, yeah, I can do this stuff. So I got out there, and a few things to talk about with my personal perspective was how we look at people and judge people. How we judge people, and the saying is, don't judge a book by the cover. We are definitely manipulated and trained in this country to view certain people like celebrities, football players. There's like an image that we expect someone is cool or good at something, right? And getting out to China, there's hundreds of students around you. And to be honest with you, at that time, coming from the UK, which is quite an established place in the world and still is with fashion and these type of things, I was definitely a more of a cooler kid than a lot of these other people around me, these Shaolin guys. But you would look at them and think they're no one, they can't do anything. Who are these kids? Who are these kids? They look like, without being rude, my perspective at the time was these look like the geekiest kids. And then when it comes to training though, geez, you know, in every element from flexibility, strength, endurance, it's just indescribable. At first it was actually indescribable seeing and young children. I was 16 and I'm a Westerner. I was quite big and not as big as I am now, but I was big and strong already at 16. A lot of the Chinese kids, they're 16, 17. They look like they're 12, 13 years old. So I'd see these little scrawny looking kids and think, yeah, no way I could take them, or I could out push up them, or I could run faster than them. And yeah, the expectation of judging that book by the cover, man, changed because I was seeing things that I couldn't believe. We'd go to class and everyone could do everything. It'd be like, all right, warm up. You do your run up the mountain. You're doing all these crazy activities. The morning, the first thing you do when you wake up, you don't eat. You go for a run. You're running up a mountain and you're doing drill work. And depends on how your coach is feeling, but you're crawling back down on your hands and knees. You're doing headstands on concrete. Wheelbarrowing each other, carrying each other up and down the mountain, like side up and down a series of steps. And you come back, you have breakfast, and then you start training. And the first kind of session of the day, which is about 8 to 11 o'clock, that 3-hour period, you're doing something called Ji Gong, and Ji Gong just translates into basic drills. So it consists of basic kicks, basic acrobatic moves, basic form drills, etc., stretches, and literally your classes are maybe 30 to 40 students. And you've taught martial arts as well, or are teaching martial arts. How it is and what the expectation is. You tell everyone, okay, drop down box splits. You're going to get a few kids who are naturally good at box splits and they're just going to do it. Then you're going to get the odd few students who train really hard and are kind of down, but they're struggling, but they're willing to push through the pain. And then you get the students who are oblivious to how stiff they are and they're just kind of stretching and they're super high off the floor. That's my experience with teaching in the UK anyway. In China, you got everyone. You drop down to the box splits, everyone is just down, and I'm the only one there now up. So coming from the UK, being a more privileged student or more advanced student, I was now right at the bottom. And not only was I at the bottom, a lot of the people who were ahead of me were young children, and it wasn't because they were naturally flexible. It was the amount of training that they're putting in. I'm talking about every student is in box splits, not the top 3 students. Let's take a photo because they could do box splits before they even started training with us. No, they're training intensely, and it's painful. But there's something about and these are things that I took from my experience and, me being a Westerner, something about team, TEAM, together everyone achieves more. Being in that environment and being pushed to that extent is definitely a huge part of progress. It's not just luck that all of these kids are in box splits or all of these trainees are in box splits. It's the fact that they're going through it together every day and they're being pushed. And they all end up in box splits. They all end up in box splits. I mean, my box splits right now isn't the best. I would say flexibility is probably one of my weaker elements. But when I was training out in China, I was right down there as well, being pushed every day. And you're stretching 6-7 times a day to an intense level every day, 6 days a week. So you get good very fast, and you learn to be very adaptive, and recovery is very fast. But all of these elements, yeah, it was crazy. The level was unbelievable. When it came to doing flips, and we're training on concrete, everyone would just be ready to do head flips, no hands, head flips on the concrete, back flips. And there's a lot of detan moves, ground moves in Shaolin system where you're flipping and you land on the floor, which I've done in the UK. Again, on mats. You know, you do these things on mats and you think you're really cool, and then you get out there and, you know, some of these students like to train barefoot as well, you know, and just on concrete. And it's a whole new world of martial arts, you know, very, very unique, very tough, very physically and mentally tough for the individual. And it was, for me, it was stimulating though. It wasn't hard in the sense that I wanted to give up. It was hard in the moment, but I loved it. It was just like, geez, this is what I wanted, you know, like all the movies I had seen, training in the clubs that I had been in the UK. You training, you know, once a week, twice a week, at best 4 times a week, you know, for an hour, you know, in the evening on a Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then maybe a Sunday or something like that. So it was great. It was a great experience, and yeah, training continued like that throughout the day. You train, like I said, in the morning. You have breakfast. You train from 8 to 11. Then you have quite a long period depending on the season. So from 11 to about 3, you'll have lunch and you'll have a sleeping period. During the summer, you definitely sleep until more like 3, just because it's so hot outside. In the winter, you'll sleep less and you'll train an earlier time. But let's just take summer period. So you'd kind of sleep up until 3 after having lunch, and then from 3 till 6, another 3 hour slot, and then 6 till 7 you'll have dinner, and then 7 till 9 is more like self-training, unless someone's done something wrong and the coach wants to go beast mode on everyone. Then it's kind of just self-training where you're expected to practice your forms, maybe do some meditation. You could do some kind of conditioning work, partner work, sparring work, you know, stuff like Wing Chun dummy. I remember one kid, and he's still at this particular place where I trained. His name, he goes by the name of Da Druang, his name is, but in English, everyone calls him Tyson. And he would just be in horse stance. He just loved it. He would do, there's 2 things I remember him doing. One is horse stance, and he would just be in this deep horse stance, obviously not for hours without moving, but whilst you're training, he's over there. So, you know, every time you look at him, he's in horse stance. So it appeared that he's in a horse stance for an hour or so, you know. He would do the horse stance. And then another thing, which is pretty unique to the Shaolin system, is straight kicks, which are these kicks, you know, where we just kick our legs up. And the goal is to actually get your foot to your head. That's kind of a beginner level, right? Which is almost impossible for most. But that's the beginner level. Then you work down your face. So your foot might hit your head, then it might hit your eyes, your nose, your lip, your bottom lip. This guy would be there doing his horse stance and then standing up and doing straight kicks where he would just be kicking, and he would be hitting his chin. He constantly had a bruise just right here where he had been stretching and just kicking and kicking and kicking. It was incredible. You know, again, it was like straight out of a movie. So for a long time, like living there was no internet as well. You know, it was still, I'm talking about 2005, and this is a rural area of China. There wasn't a lot of development. So for a large amount of time I was there, at least the first year or so, it was just me in the environment. You know, my mom would actually, you know, still with you know, like a phone card, would call into the office, and if I was available at that moment in time, I would get to speak to her. But it wasn't until around late 2006 that I think YouTube was even out, and then it came out in China, and then it got banned, and then Skype came out. And then I would go to internet cafes, started to pop up. I would go to internet cafe every now and again, and I was actually able to see my family. But yeah, for the first period, it was just me in the environment, you know. So I was literally just living in a movie constantly. And yeah, there was tough stages. Definitely in the moment, I remember tough stages, feeling sick, feeling aching. Nutrition, although nutrition is very, very important, and for me now as a teacher and as a self-coached martial artist now, I take nutrition very seriously. But back in China days, you took what you was given, and what you was given was very basic. So nutrition wasn't the best. So muscle recovery and those type of things were probably difficult. Not that I understood a lot of it, but those were probably where some of the difficult times came, just not having enough protein and energy to kind of power me through the workouts. And that goes for everyone else out there. So we're all going through the same struggle, but we all got through it. You know, everyone who was out there with me, my peers, you know, who were training, we all got through it. And I think, again, teamwork makes the dream work. It was that encouragement from everyone that you knew, you know, another day you wake up, you run that mountain, and, you know, the coach says, drop down, do push-ups, do bunny hops. You're just doing it. You're just following, and you're a big group. You're a big family, and it's right out of a scene of Dragon Ball Z, you know, the cartoon. It's just hardcore training, just very, very fun. And I think for me growing up in China during a period with no internet was great. You know, I think the isolation and separation from the rest of the world was probably at that moment for me what I needed, you know, and helped me become the person I am today. Because I know of people who I've helped go to China more recently, and even the Shaolin themselves, everyone has phones. So, no, you know, you could be out there right now. I could be out there right now talking to you like this right now, you know. So having access to that means language barrier straight away. You know, I know a lot of people who go out to China now and they struggle hugely with language. And it's not because they're not good at learning Chinese, it's because they're speaking English too much. You know, when you've got your iPhone with you and you can just call someone on a throughout the day, it's not even on a weekly, it's on a, you know, wherever you want, you can message someone, talk to someone, type in English. You know, for me, for a long period, I wasn't even writing. You know, I wasn't writing in English, I wasn't speaking in English. I mean, my accent is always a little bit muddled up anyway. But if you look at some interviews back in 2008, where I came back to UK, because I ended up being part of the Wheel of Life, and I was interviewed by, you know, ITV, BBC, my accent was all over the place because I hadn't spoken English. You know, certain words, pronouncing certain words, I hadn't been speaking a lot of English often. So that's one thing that definitely, again, for anyone in the early 2000s who ended up in China studying martial arts, which is probably just a handful of people, it was a very unique time period, you know, just before the internet era. It allowed us to definitely isolate and focus more on training, language, culture, and community, you know, because being part of their lifestyle also is very important when it comes to training. Because uh, when you first arrive out there, obviously there's a little bit of culture difference, you know, culture difference, which it's not racism, but they'll look at you differently. You know, the way you behave, the way you act, the way you talk, the way you want to wash yourself. You know, there's definitely like a huge separation there at the beginning. But then having no other option but to be part of that family, I think allows you then to kind of, you know, slowly become part of that family, and you're not separated anymore. And that helps with the learning process, the mental side of things as well, because obviously there's a lot of conversation, like conversations we're having. You need to be able to speak the language. You need to be able to understand what your teachers and masters are saying. I studied a lot of Buddhism out there, which was really cool, but that was actually very difficult because obviously Buddhist scriptures and chanting and all of that type of thing is all in Chinese or Sanskrit. So it's very difficult to understand some of the elements surrounding Kung Fu or Shaolin, you know, Chan Buddhism. So having the ability to speak to others to get an understanding is very, very important. So yeah.
So you just touched on it then, and that's what I was kind of going to ask is when people think of Kung Fu, Shaolin Kung Fu, obviously they have these pictures from what they see in films, and some of that's what we described, you know, monks in robes doing crazy things, standing on spears on one foot, head flips, like you said. But I'm guessing a lot of people think there's a religious connotation that's, you know, they spend half the time chanting, meditating. So what is now that you've been there? Are you officially a Shaolin monk? How does that process work? Is it partly religion, and also how kind of combat orientated is it in terms of, so you know, like you've described, you're kind of being made to be like an athlete, this superhuman in terms of conditioning, But how much emphasis to actually put on? Because one thing you don't see very much of is Shaolin Kung Fu as an art form in the same way you might see Muay Thai or Jiu Jitsu, where you see them taking part on the world stage in ring sports and so forth.
Yeah,
Is there an emphasis on the combat, or is it more about other things?
yeah, cool. Um, so let me go through how I heard that. So firstly, the religious side of it. So yeah, Shaolin is a blend between two things, Kung Fu and Chan Buddhism. So Chan, the word Chan is a Chinese word, which is in Japanese is Zen. So you know when we're buying candles and it says a Zen candle and whatnot, that's Chan. So Chan or Zen is the Oriental version of Buddhism. So Chan Buddhism is just Chinese Buddhism, if you like. And it came about, I won't go into too much detail, maybe for another episode or podcast. The Buddha Dharma, an Indian prince, Buddhist monk, traveled across from India through Asia, sharing his philosophies and beliefs. And that is how Buddhism ended up in China. And Chinese, obviously, slowly over time, added their own elements and additions, and therefore it became Chan Buddhism. And Shaolin Temple is a Chan temple, and the disciples there slowly started to develop their skills mainly to stay healthy for longevity and health. Meditating is quite a difficult thing. Sitting in a cross-leg position, even me and you sitting, just like in daily life, sitting at a desk, you need to stretch, right? We all know people have these bad postures and bad backs from sitting. Meditation is the same. Any extended period of sitting down, you need to stretch, you need to move, you need to find ways to adapt, So Kung Fu and Chan Buddhism were kind of created simultaneously, and then this style of movement to keep the body healthy for meditation slowly developed into martial arts. And there was why, because as with any generation, any time, there's wars and invasions, and the Shaolin Temple, as it becomes renowned, people want to attack it, so it needs defenders. And the monks themselves started to use what the skills that they were developing, what they had to defend themselves. And this went from farming tools, all of the weapons and the styles, the stick stems from the broom, the spear stems from the broom, and then this develops into swords and pudaos, long sticks with knives on tops, and they became renowned for their art form. And I'm sure, and as myth says, that the Shaolin monks were used by the emperor, and the Wheel of Life is about that, how the emperor of China used the Shaolin monks in wars because of their renowned fighting skills. But we're talking about actual combat with knives and swords and things like that, that type of war, which obviously over time changed due to firearms and guns. You're not going to go to a gun war with sticks anymore. So it kind of faded out in that sense, but the skills and the training remained the same. And definitely the level of Shaolin in terms of a practice is a very full style. So it covers a lot of components which are very important in life and martial arts. To list some of them, strength, endurance, flexibility, focus, some of these key things which you get from all martial arts, but maybe you get more from different elements. For example, I know a lot of people involved in more extreme fighting martial arts do yoga on the side, as an example. Why? Because they want to recover and stay loose and nimble. Well, Shaolin has those elements within it already. So Shaolin is quite a full art form. Bringing it to your question to do with, is it useful in combat? Can it be used like in hand-to-hand kind of more modern sports style fighting? Most definitely. In my perspective, most definitely. Obviously, I think when it comes to fighting is very unique because it's martial arts, but it's definitely down from my perspective to the individual. How well, you can get an individual in any form of martial art who wants to fight. And if they've got that fighting spirit and they're able to translate what the teacher, it's like the Bible, how, the Quran, how people translate what they want from the Bible to make sense for them. And it works. It works. Martial arts is the same. You can take any element, you can take any form of striking and apply it if you have the know-how. right? That's my perspective of the individuals as fighters. So can Shaolin be used? Most definitely, because you're training yourself to such an extent physically, mentally, that you're overcoming certain challenges and difficulties that will definitely be useful. Me personally, do I do a lot of fighting? I did when I was a lot younger, especially when I was in China, and we can talk about that in a little moment as well. We do kickboxing, Chinese kickboxing, Sunda, which is a good sport. Obviously, as a standalone sport, it's not going to work in the UFC. You need other skills you need to be able to bring into the ring as well. But it's very, very useful. But the Shaolin can be used for fighting. Like I said, it trains you mentally and physically and prepares you for that. But when it comes to actual competition fighting, unless you're training in the ring all day, every day to fight, then no, it's not going to. Like if you put me up against someone who's training, let's say, for a year in the ring fighting with a bad coach, not the best coach in the style that they're doing, but they're fighting, they're sparring all day, every day, or throughout the weeks, they're probably going to have an advantage, not on me physically, or mentally, but obviously just the it's the theory versus the practical side of things. And I got no fear in saying that. I don't know if you can see these TV screens up there, but they haven't been updated. But one of them is on a loop. I actually had a fight booked in for March 27th last year, a boxing fight. Obviously, we locked down literally 1 week before the fight. And I spent almost 3 months preparing for the fight. I was training out of Peacock Boxing Gym in in East London. And I was ready. I was ready. I was sparring every day. I was fighting. I was applying a style called cannon boxing, Pal Tren, which is quite an explosive style of training with a lot of uppercuts, which to me closely reflects like a Tyson style of fighting. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Mike Tyson. Grew up with watching his fights, and the more kind of straight on style of fighting, opposed to the more kind of traditional stand up position. That was the style I was going for. And I was ready. I was ready to rumble. I was going. There's a few local gyms around me. Monster Gym, which is quite a famous gym. It's literally just 2 minutes down the road from the temple. They've got upstairs. They've got a ring, and a lot of fighters come out of the ring there. And I was going there and just sparring random people. I'd just go there and I train there anyway. And I'd just go upstairs and I was doing sparring. And I wanted to get hit. I wanted, like I said just a minute ago, unless you're actually in the ring getting hit, then you don't know how to get hit. It's like learning to drive a car. I can tell you exactly what you need to do, but until you get in the car and you feel that biting point and you feel that fear of having to stop immediately when there's another car or a traffic light or something changes, you can't practice that without practicing that. So, for me, I was ready to whoop ass. And, the fight didn't go through. Obviously, once all of COVID and everything is kind of done with, I'm going to continue with that. And it was just something I wanted to tick off. It's a boxing fight. I just wanted to tick it off, have it in my belt and say, look, that's something that I've done. Everyone's asking, can I jump in the ring? Someone offered me this opportunity. I said, let's do it. I was ready to whoop ass, but that's what fighters say, isn't it? When you're about to fight everyone, but on both sides, you're ready to go in. I was ready to go in. I was excited. It was fun. But saying that, after that kind of fight was cancelled, where has my focus been? Not with fighting. I don't have a huge excitement with wanting to get in the ring and hit someone. I'm more excited by challenging myself on a personal level when it comes to strength, flexibility, speed, and skill. I find skill very interesting. Like things like finger push-ups, handstand push-ups, muscle-ups, things like holding your horse stance for the longest time. I like to feel that, me personally, I have this thing with average. I don't want to be average. I like to think that, in order to be unique, you have to be different. And in order to be different, you can't be average. And obviously, with social media going around, everyone says the same thing. Everyone's unique. Everyone wants to make a post and say that, it's Monday, everyone wake up, let's go get it. Anyone can say that. You know, everyone says the same garbage on social media. The thing is, they ain't doing it. You know, most people aren't doing these things. And again, it's kind of cliche. I don't want to put myself in a situation where I'm saying that, but I'm 32 now, and for a large majority of my life, I've been saying those things, but I've been doing those things. So when I said I'm gonna go China, I went to China. You know, when I ended up in the Wheel of Life, I ended up in the Wheel of Life. When I said that I wanted to open up a Kung Fu school, I opened up a Kung Fu school. You know, so it's saying it is one thing. Again, we've heard this for generations. You know, Elvis Presley, a little less conversation, a little more action. You know, things are about action. Actions speak louder than words. So I think that a lot of people get stuck on this particular period of time where social media is so powerful. You know, it's in your pocket all the time. You could be on your couch. You don't even need to be training. You post a picture from last year, training really hard. Let's go. You know, it's this kind of, which is very it's very easy to fall into that bracket because you're on social media, and when you're on there, you're swiping and you're seeing other people do the same thing. You're drawn into it. You know, it's a distraction. You know, it can be a very, very powerful tool, but at the same time, it can be a very big distraction on your life. So you got to be careful of that. You got to be careful of that, and you got to find focus in what you love. And for me, fighting, I suppose it comes from a level of confidence. I don't have any fear of fighting. I feel very confident that I can self-defend myself. And if I wanted to get into a ring with someone of my level, you know, my age, my weight, and I train for it, I think I'll do very well. And I'm up for the challenge. Maybe, you know, meeting you, and I know you do a lot of that stuff. Maybe in the future, we'll do more stuff and I'll get opportunity to show how my training can help in the ring. You know, I'll definitely be up for that. You know, I'll be up for that, and challenging myself from a skillful level, because fighting, obviously, to an outsider, I think to an outsider who doesn't know much about martial arts, like a family, if we're talking about a mom, you know, with her child, and you say martial arts and then you say fight, she doesn't want the child to do it. You know, suddenly it becomes this negative fighting, which is wrong. You know, for me, fighting isn't negative. You know, obviously brawling out on the streets and being a thug, that's negative. But learning skills, which is what it's ultimately about, fighting is a very unique thing. And part of your question was, would Shaolin work? And we don't see a lot of Shaolin people within the MMA and UFC world, which is true. But to kind of cut in my perspective, you're perhaps only looking at a window which is very new, right? If we even take boxing, if you type in boxing from the 1910s and watch how they were fighting, man, you'd be rolling all over the floor the way they were fighting, you know, with their hands up like this and, you know, these big swings. Boxing has changed. You know, just the basic style and movement has developed and changed. UFC is the same. You go back just 20 years or 15 years and watch some of the original stuff to now what you're seeing, when you're seeing people flying kick. That's Shaolin right there. The flying kicking off the net with a flying punch. I've seen dudes do the cartwheel over someone, and then, you know, the guy's on the floor. And I'm intrigued because it's skill. You know, they're cartwheeling over, landing, and the guy now is in a position where he doesn't know where the other guy is. You have dudes doing backflips, not very well, but they do backflips and, you know, coming down. So I think, to answer your question, is it useful? Without a doubt, bro. Like, man, remember when internet came out and people said internet's not going to be useful? Man, how wrong were they, right? How wrong were they? Like, the internet, no one could imagine what it's become. No one imagined we could just talk like this. So I think in the years to come, in our generation, when we're both a little older, I think we're going to start to see athletes who are much more creative in the ring. I think the confidence level is going to shoot through the roof. I mean, you see it with just general acrobatics anyway. When I was growing up, there was no one in my school that could do a flip. You know, no one. Now you go on Instagram and you're seeing kids on concrete do double backflips, flip over cars, You're seeing things which just did not exist 10 years ago. Like literally, not because the internet didn't exist, we couldn't see it. I'm talking about things did not exist. People did not do them. I mean, Bruce Lee, was famous for his little finger push up with his thumb. And it was like, whoa, dude, I'm pretty sure every one of my students can do a thumb and finger push up. Now you're seeing kids. There's a guy on YouTube who self-trained a one finger handstand. And I'm like, by golly, this is crazy. This is crazy. So to answer your question, right now in this particular moment, I don't think that the understanding of Shaolin for practitioners who want to fight is high enough. I think for me personally, and I'm willing to hold my word to it as well, and like after lockdown, come and do some more bits with you, just as a research, just as some fun. I am a Shaolin martial artist. I haven't done too many other things, right? I've been training. I moved to China. I run the temple. All the other elements that I do, are part of my Shaolin. I would love to see how it works out against other martial artists and whatnot, and test it out and have opportunity to see what it can do. Because I just believe that the level of understanding for something like Shaolin Kung Fu from the practitioner who wants to fight is not ready to put into practice. And then for me, who I feel perhaps more confident with fighting, I just don't want to fight. So you're not going to see me fight because that's just not my goal. That's not my vision, right? But for the sake of martial arts, I think that it's important that there's a development stage where those things are challenged and tested, And that's how we'll see. But I'm pretty sure, regardless, that in years to come, you're going to see people doing things which you already can see the basis of, like in the UFC, which are not typical and are very unique. And a lot of these things are going to come from, I'm pretty sure you're going to see lots of things come from martial arts like Shaolin. I'm definitely 100% sure. I'll hold my word to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think my point really was it wasn't so much would it work in the sports sense, just wondering, obviously because I've never done it, and obviously because you've had this experience in China, is at its root when it's being taught in that traditional way. What was the sort of split on sparring and combat related, or combat sport related? I was not really differentiating there, but
Yeah,
because obviously a lot of, like with the Wheel of Life and what people see a lot of nowadays is these extreme feats of endurance and strength, like you said. And I was just inquiring as to, obviously, I know how skillful and athletic you are, your students are, and I've been telling people ever since I've been down, and I think there's a lot that people could learn and take away into their own sports, own martial
yeah.
arts. But I guess really my kind of question with what I said, and it was probably my fault because I asked a lot of questions in one sentence, was there an emphasis on sparring in the traditional sense in China, or was it mainly a small component of, because
Yeah,
like you said, you're covering such a lot in one day. How much
yeah.
was dedicated to that kind of live sparring work, or was it mainly the conditioning and the drills?
Cool. Yeah. So yeah, well, that more of a specific question there. So yeah, definitely. I mean, the more traditional styles, there was with the more traditional styles, there was more emphasis on the conditioning element of, for example, iron fist. So you'll be punching a wall, or you'll be hitting a tree with your arm, which is all related to, there will be demonstrations of, if you block and how you block. You've got to be ready to take the impact, which again is a normal thing you probably experience as well. Like with the shin, when you're blocking with your shin, you've got to have a hard shin. You can know how to block, but if you're not conditioned, you're going to get hurt as well. So with the traditional side of things, that was from my experience. Remember, this is just my experience, though. That was probably the limit to where sparring and combat came into it. And this again, though, I have a theory on why and how. But let me continue. Where the actual sparring came in, which was very aggressive. So remember, all of the madness of running up a mountain and crawling down crawling down your hands and knees and doing headstands on concrete. That same madness was also reflected in the Sundar training, in the kickboxing training. So I didn't do a lot like you're doing kicks and things like that all the time. But there was a period of time which was probably about 6 months, which is quite a lot. When you talk about numbers, you're training 10 hours a day, 6 months is quite an intense period of time, equivalent to maybe 5 or 6 years in the UK, if not more, of training. So I did about 6 months of actual kickboxing training where the whole routine was switched. So we no longer did the Jibengong basic kicks. You won't be walking around doing your basic kicks. Now you were doing the specific Sundar kicks. So you've got your round kick, your roundhouse kick, your side kick. Then you would be doing actual just pad work. Literally looks very similar to Muay Thai. Sundar. Everyone knows, well, a lot of people who are into martial arts know Sundar. You type it in YouTube, you see, the kickboxing shorts with the Muay Thai style pads. You're doing your punches, your kicks, your punches and your kicks. And then you're doing sparring. And it's very, very aggressive sparring. I wouldn't necessarily say it was, for me, how I would like to spar now with my students. Again, in the UK, I wouldn't be able to run a session like that really. But it was very aggressive sparring where it was more like fighting, yeah? And it was like the coaches would pair you up and you would have to fight. It wasn't very nice sometimes, like you didn't want to do it all of the time. But again, like I said, the same madness approach with, all right, you're going to have to crawl up the mountain, and it's going to take you an hour. It would be the same sort of thing with the sparring. So, you might not be in the best condition in that moment of time. You might be tired or you've just run a mountain. Suddenly you've got to go 10 rounds with a fresh student, someone fresh for 3 minutes at a time. And you're taking beatings, you're getting bruised, you're getting black eye, like I said, more like fighting opposed to sparring. Like when I was sparring, getting ready for my fight, I wanted to get knocked about a little bit so I could get the sensation of it, but I wasn't trying to go home every day looking like I'd been in a brawl, whereas that period of time in China was a lot of aggressive sparring like that, and it was teamwork makes the dream work. I wouldn't say that I would wake up in the morning and feel good, like, oh yeah, my legs feel nice and loose and I'm ready. You would be beaten and you kind of, like, if it was me now, I would choose to sleep. But again, you'd be up, woken out of the bed, you've got to do a mile sprint, then you come back and then you're on the bags, you're non-stop. So it was the same sort of mad approach to training with the Sundar training, and there was a lot of aggressive sparring and fighting going on, but it was very focused on Sundar. So, we weren't using a lot of traditional techniques, and the whole theory around it was not based on traditional martial arts. So it wasn't like, okay, there's this block and this strike, let's go in and do that. It was, these are the kicks, these are the strikes, and this is how it's going to go down. And then we would just train and kind of, fight like that and spar like that. So it was a little aggressive, but definitely time well spent. A lot of, again, during that period anyway, you learn a lot about fighting in itself and being hit, and being able to deal with being hit, and whilst being hit, then being able to kind of counter attack or breathe. And you learn how to breathe differently. It's all good running. You want to go for a mile run, and I can run a mile in like 5.5 minutes right now. But when I get in the ring and you punch me in the ribs, and now I've got to move around and learn to control my breathing, it's different. So it was definitely a unique experience, and it changed my perspective a little bit. Still didn't encourage me enough to put my focus on fighting. I enjoyed it, but when that time was kind of over and we got back to doing some of the other elements of martial arts, I enjoyed that more so, and that's kind of where my passion lies. But yeah, oh, that's right. Sorry, I said I've got a theory. The theory is martial arts, as it's taught in England, has obviously developed. I mean, MMA, when I was a kid, just wasn't really a thing. I don't know your specific age and what your experience was growing up as a child, but martial arts definitely for me in the 90s was karate still. That's what typically martial arts was. And yeah, there was karate competitions. When I was a kid, we did karate competitions as well. Again, not very at that moment in time in the 90s for a child, wasn't that aggressive. It wasn't that difficult. There was boxing and karate, and I think those two were quite far apart in people's perspective to what they would want to do, whether they were doing martial arts or whether they were doing boxing. And martial arts isn't boxing, and boxing isn't martial arts, although it is obviously now. It's all very closely entangled, but back then it wasn't. If you take yourself back another 50 years to the 50s, 70 years, there was no karate. None of that even existed. So we're talking about a very short time period. Now, if we take it back to China and do the same thing, Sanda became more famous in China during the Bruce Lee period, late 70s, after Bruce Lee had kind of brought to the world this idea of Chinese kickboxing. China really picked up on this. They pick up on everything out there, and it was like, okay, everyone's in love with this dude, and it's Chinese kickboxing. Bruce Lee brought this word, this style. Bruce Lee did Kung Fu, but then he started to talk about Chinese kickboxing. He started to bring this element to it, and then Sanda became very famous. But Sanda is a very new sport, again. So these Sanda fighters or people, Sanda, you go back 100 years, Sanda didn't exist either. Sanda wasn't a thing. It wasn't a big thing. So we're looking at a time period right now where at the temple, including my period, I went to China because I had seen the Wheel of Life, a theater show with these, like you've described, superhuman athletes doing these incredible feats. Why did Shaolin become so popular with all of this? For those who don't know, it was Jet Li. Jet Li's movie Shaolin Temple in the 80s just launched Shaolin in China, not the rest of the world, in China, into everyone's household. And everyone just flocked towards Shaolin to train Shaolin martial arts. You're talking about millions of people seeing a TV movie and wanting to be that person, wanting to be Jet Li. So there was a huge demand for what he was doing in the movie, which was more of the performance style, more of that element. So this whole generation, this whole period, we've got Sanda because of Bruce Lee, we've got Jet Li bringing the Shaolin system and bringing it to the mainstream. And obviously whatever they bring forward is what people perceive it to be. Just like karate in the 90s. I think karate in the 90s was definitely considered less effective by most people. Whereas I would say now karate, and you watch some of the karate tournaments on YouTube, they're definitely more, it's definitely evolved and developed very quickly, with the style, the aggression, the movement. I think everything is developing. So like I said earlier, I think in the years to come, we're going to see more Shaolin coming out into like the UFC and stuff like that. And I think it's just generational. I think for us as individuals, if we can learn anything from history, is all we need to do is look back 50 years and we'll see how different things are. Just like for children nowadays, the telephone is just normal. They don't question, did you have a phone when you was a kid, Dad? It's just a normal thing. But obviously for you and me growing up, man, if you told me when I was 10 years old that I'll be able to just go on a device and see any video that I want, then I would just laugh at you and say, well, you're a fool, But in reality today, look where we are now, multiple devices talking, it's just incredible. Incredible. So yeah, I think time, the three very important concepts or morals or principles in my life are time, patience, and consistency. You have to be consistent with what you do. You have to be willing to give it time, and you have to be patient. But those same three principles can be applied to anything. And I think give it time, the martial arts will be consistent, because martial arts there's a demand. People love martial arts. And I've had people, and there's people like me, I'm no longer just sitting here with a robe on and a black belt telling people to come in and I'm only going to draw one audience. I'm only going to draw that audience who don't want to fight. I'm going to draw that audience who are only coming for the discipline. You know, like that's what karate was. For me growing up, I used to go into a karate club and there could be a fat dude who's the master. He's got his black belt. You come in, you bow to him, and there didn't seem like any health or fitness involved, but there was this discipline, you know. But could the guy fight? Probably not. Whereas nowadays, you're getting dudes who are actual fighters who are then teaching these traditional martial arts. So it takes time. It takes time. But I think with time and with people like myself, and not saying I'm skillful, but people like me, people who are taking a new approach to martial arts, people who are learning and aren't. I'm not trying to be a master. You know, I'm not trying to to say to people you have to come in and bow to me because I'm great. This is what I do and I have fun with it. And if you want to have fun with me and train and get super strong, come and join in. And if you like to fight, the things that I'm going to teach you and incorporate into your knowledge, you could definitely take away and then implement into other elements. And if those elements were to say to fight, I think it would be extremely useful. But it takes time and we have to be patient, you know. But I think in the future to come, there's going to be a lot more creativity in things like UFC. I think just looking back on the last 15 years, anyone can see that.
So obviously you've now opened up London Temple, your own academy, and it's so unique looking. You know, for everyone listening or watching this, I would definitely recommend visiting. You've done such an amazing job. It looks fantastic. So what now that you've been able to create your own space, your own temple, what is it you do down there then?
Cool. Yeah. So good question. I mean, so I've got drawings of pretty much what the temple looks like from when I was a kid, from comic books that I would, trace out images or draw images. So the inspiration for the temple architecture here has all been Chinese temple architecture, from the colors, the patterns, and then inside it's more modern. You know, kind of yin yang, bringing that whole kind of east and west together for me anyway. Because the inside we've got mats, mirrors, music, all of the things that I feel are beneficial from the Western approach to training. I've captured, and then some of the elements, not all because it's a small space here, but some of the Chinese elements, the environment, the vibe, the feel, the Buddhism, I've brought to the outside area, the courtyard area. So having that yin yang kind of balance, this place is a space for people to come to and realize their dreams and become better versions of themselves and take whatever it is that they can take from me or the temple and use that to propel them towards their vision, their passion. This is a space that when I was growing up, I needed. That's why I went out to China. I didn't have access to a facility or space like this growing up. When I was training, when I say I was training Wing Chun and karate, it was on a badminton court. It was in a leisure center, and it's not the right environment. It's not the right environment. You're not motivated. You need, the environment is extremely important for the development of the individual. So the space that I've created here helps me to continue to develop. I'm always developing. If you look at pictures of me 10 years ago to now, my physique has developed hugely. If you look at, height of my jump, it's developed. I'm always trying to push myself. So I'm using this space as a space to propel myself, and on that journey, I hope to help others do the same, and also to challenge me. I feel that was one thing actually very important when I was growing up in the martial arts that I was involved in. We had a certain level of respect, which was fear for our teachers, for the master, which I don't think is right. I'm young. I'm still young. I'm 32. For me, I want to challenge my students. When you come to train and we go for a run, I'm trying just as hard to outrun you as you might be trying to outrun me. I'm not anyone special. You know, when I push some weights and you're the same weight as me, I want to push more than you, or I want you to see that I'm your weight and you can do what I can do. There's nothing special about me. You know, there's nothing that makes me better than anyone else. You know, there's no God-given gifts here. This is all achieved through dedication and consistency. And I want anyone who enjoys what I do to be able to come here and enjoy it too. And like I said, anyone who feels that a slice of the cake here could help them on their journey will come through. You know, that's what I built this place for. And since building it back in 2009, we've had thousands of people come through. You know, thousands of people, and it puts a smile on my face to know that without me, this spot wouldn't be here. You know, without me, those thousands of people that had come through, you know, they wouldn't have had the opportunity that they had by being here. You know, so I make it my responsibility. So, you know, Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. I had the opportunity to go to China, and that gave me the power, the knowledge. You know, I speak Chinese. I know the Shaolin forms. I love to train. I'm able to push myself physically because of my experiences. I'm also able to channel my experiences to help me mentally. So I have a responsibility to give back to the community, both local and internationally now, using things like social media, because there's people out there who are struggling. COVID is, you know, we spoke briefly, you know, not taking the negative, but looking at the positive of things. For some people, you know, they can't see that. You know, they're going through difficult times. You know, some people have struggled with COVID. You know, people have lost their lives due to COVID, but some people have lost their lives due to the difficulties of COVID. You know, there's been a huge increase in suicides and depression and difficult times. So I hope that I can act as a figure to help motivate and inspire people, you know, help motivate and inspire people to stay on their feet, stay focused, and become the best versions of themselves.
Yeah, no, I mean, like I said, I've been down to the temple, and I think it's amazing. And you know, I told you at the time, you know, blown away by your instruction and your translation of Shaolin Kung Fu to, like you said, that modern time and that modern approach. Um, well, I've got to say, I've really enjoyed listening about all your experiences today. It's made me kind of want to book a trip to China to the temple myself. So I'll have to speak to you more about that. I'm definitely interested now in
Definitely.
going getting some time over there. So for anyone listening who wants to get more involved with Shaolin Kung Fu and yourself, where can they learn more? How can they get in touch with you?
Well, definitely just check out temple.london, which is our website. Just type temple.london into your web browser, or check me out on Instagram. Check out temple.ldn. Temple.ldn is the temple page, and you can check me out. But you'll find me on the temple page. You'll find my son, my wife, lots of cool videos, lots of inspirational stuff. But yeah, man, over to you with regards to China. Obviously, once COVID's all finished, I think COVID's brought us together. You know, two passionate martial artists from the UK. I think we'll be working together a lot more. Obviously, I'd love to have you come down again, do some more shoots, and I'd love to come visit you. Obviously, you got all the Dragon Ball artwork, and I love it, man. It's a different vibe, and it's a vibe that, you know, I feel that I want to get down with. So yeah, I definitely want to come down. And once everything settles with COVID, man, we'll go out to China. I'll be more than happy to come out to China with you and introduce you to some of the people that I trained with, and you know, perhaps do a whole series on the search of, because I think it's a quite a common question: does Shaolin work? Would it work in a fight? You know, and maybe go investigate a little bit more. You know, because although I said it takes time and things will develop, it takes during that time people to develop them. You know, the iPhone didn't just come out. First, we had the iPod, the iPhone 1, etc. It took time to get to where we are today, but it took effort from people during that time, and each of those people are as valuable as the last. So definitely, man, I would love to act as an investigator with you and continue from our side, from our perspectives. You know, what is martial arts? What is Shaolin? can Shaolin work? Would it work? Well, let's go to China and try it out. Let's find out.
Oh well, definitely up for a trip to China with you. Okay, so like I said, thanks, Matt. I look forward to us
Always.
spending more time with you. And guys, anyone who's listening or watching, make sure you go and follow Matt. Go and check out the temple, and if you get a chance, go and visit. It's an amazing place, and Matt is an amazing teacher, and an amazing instructor. Thank you once again, Matt. It's been a pleasure speaking to you, and I'll catch you all soon.
Always. Thank you, my man. Take care.